Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Wednesday. It's November 28th. This will be our chart lesson for the day, and it was a relatively interesting day. What looked like was going to be a little lower volume, less volatility, suddenly rocketed out of here. Uh, Rocketed. We had this is like a little spike in channel. We spiked up and had a channel, and there may be a bigger pattern here. It doesn't really matter. You really needed these smaller term channels and trend lines and so forth to really keep you on the right side. There's not a lot of trades today. Uh, this was a little bit difficult to know what was going on, especially right in here. Notice this resistance across here. We are making higher lows here every time. That's usually a sign that you're going to break higher and break out. But we broke higher and looked like we were going to sell off, and they just kind of gave everybody a fake out. Then it rocketed up, and we went sideways again and rocketed up. We're just kind of stair climbing up here. So it's a little difficult to trade this stuff right in here because, it's just getting a tighter and tighter window, and you don't want to go long into the highs, and you don't want to go short into that trend line either. So there's not a lot of trades in there, as you'll see. And really, not a lot of trades at all today. So let me back out. We'll talk about what's here, and won't take long today, and we'll wrap it up. When I came in, we were kind of working our way back down off this high around 7 o'clock, and we're just really kind of going sideways a lot here, and you really want to stay out of all this. You could probably say there's a trend line working right down through there, but it's more sideways than anything, and so I really don't like using the trend line there. This is more of a sideways thing, and it finally gets back to the trend line and bounces and makes a higher low there at the same time. Notice that low, so that's a higher low. Nice bullish bar right off the key entry point, right at the EMA. I like going long there. The hope is it's going to take off again. It's an easy scalp, and you get a little extra out of it. There's a little pullback right here, but you don't want to go long right into those highs. And then guess what? There's a failed break higher. There's a lower high here that generally I'd say would probably be a good trade, and you might still argue for it. But the reason I don't like it is you got this trend line working up, and everything is right there at that trend line still. So we may try to make a push up, and you may get trapped right there. So I don't think you want to go short. There's even a failed second entry long there, but we do get outside the trend line, and it's not very far back. By the time you get down here to this bar closing, I guess you could say you could go short there on the failure, but you're right into all those lows. And so again, I just don't think you can take that trade. We bounce, we come back up, and we turn down again. That bar's not, let me make this a little bigger. It's hard to see. That bar is not bearish enough right there. It's too much stem. See that big stem and then stem on each side. But then we get the lower high here first. It turns up and turns back down. I like going short when it goes out the other side. You really couldn't wait on this bar to finish because it's just so big. You could, but that's there's a lot of ticks in that bar. Really, the better entry was right across here. Now, you could have let it break lower here and dropped the limit order back here maybe. And you might have got filled. I'm not sure if it would have filled it or not, but it's another opportunity you could have tried. But then we bounce again here, and this gives you, I mean, that's technically a failed second entry long, and you get a big bearish bar. Um, I like going short right there. The only reason I made this green, and this one's like real close, you could argue for it to be red, but the reason I made it green is because we're not back to the highs. I mean, you can see we got a range going here, and there's really a midline in here as well. But you would like to see it turn down up here, but it is a lower high, and you've only got that trend line. That's the first break. So we may test this again. It ends up just it keeps on running short. So this would have been a nice entry, and you could have got a runner here. But I'm gonna leave it green just because it's not at the key entry point, which is up here. And again, you could argue there's a midline in there. You can see it's right across, right in there somewhere. I believe that's it right there. And so you're going short right into that midline. And that's never a good idea either. So something else to be concerned. Although there is plenty of room to get out if we turn back down. So it runs down. There is a breakout pullback short right here. Relatively bearish bar. It is off that key entry point. But we've moved way down here. We're way away from the EMA. I'm just not crazy about it. Again, you could argue for that one to probably be green too. There's a lot of them in here you could probably argue to be green if you want to be aggressive today. But we bounce again. We come over here. You get a second entry short, but it doesn't break higher. It doesn't get back to the trend line. None of that. So I don't think you want, and this is a lot of congestion across here. Look at the stems on both sides. I think that's just too risky. But notice what happens. We push up here. We come back. We get a first entry short. We get a second entry. Typically, you might be thinking about going short, but look at that signal bar, and that would have saved you right there. And I guarantee you some of you probably ignored the signal bar and went short and probably got burned right there. But when it turns back up, when it breaks higher here, that's a nice failed second entry short, and there's actually a second entry long. Notice the new high, first entry, pullback, second entry. It's a double test of that measured move. All you do is measure this part right here, drop it down, and you can see that's a perfect measured move there. We gave that a double test. And it takes off. This was a nice setup right here. You probably would have got a runner depending on how you played it. And then guess what? You run up, you get a first entry, you get a second entry. That one is very tempting. I didn't like it just because it's so close to that high, and we're right in the highs of what looks like the upper part of the trend channel line. But when it tries to go lower again and turns back up and goes out the other side, I like going long there, and I just look for an equal distance. And if you move this line an equal distance, notice where it starts turning down. So, I mean, you could almost argue for that one to be blue. The only reason not is because we're right into these highs of what looks like a channel here, but it turns out to be two-tiered. So I'm going to leave that one green. There's another second entry long right here. Notice that pullback first entry, pullback second entry. But again, you got a little bit of congestion there. You're not back to the key entry point. Just not really a good setup. Even though it's a second entry, it's not really a good setup. Again, you could probably argue for that one to be green because it is at the EMA. But if you notice here, you get a new high here, and then you get a first entry, and then you get a second entry, and you're back here at the EMA and right at the trend line. And so when it breaks higher there, I like it. You got plenty of room to run to the other side. It's good for a little more in a scalp, and then it comes back and it bounces again. And that's a tempting trade, but not a very bullish bar. And the next one's, I mean, this is really your signal bar, and this is not your signal bar. So you might let it break higher there and drop a limit order where you would have gotten filled off of the bar here and used it. I don't think you'd have gotten filled. It's possible. But notice we run up, you get a higher low here, first entry, you move up. There's a pull back to the trend line right here, and you're just a long way away from the EMA. But that's basically a failed second entry short off a key entry point. So you may consider that one. Again, it's not a very crazy, I'm not crazy about that setup. Look at this thing go though, but you don't know that ahead of time, and that's just a really weird rally up considering this was the trend channel right here, and then suddenly you're just going straight up. A lot of momentum there, so you may consider that one. It comes back right here again, but we're so far away from the EMA, and I'm just not, I don't even think you want to mark that one green. You can argue that this is a key entry point though, and you don't have a rough room. You do not have enough room to really get second entries in there. Comes back, you just get a first entry though. If you draw your little trend line, there's no real entry there that's safe. You're not back to the EMA. You do get your break of this channel, move to a new high, then it corrects, and you try to come back here and you get a failed second entry short on a second entry long when you think you would be trying to make a new low here off of this little trend right here. So I like going long right there. Then it runs up here and finds resistance at that same place. And if you had a little better bar right there, I wouldn't have a problem going short. That's too neutral. bounces again, and this time we push a little higher. Again, I'd probably want to wait on a lower high. This is not quite a lower high. You might argue for this one to be green, but look how we're making higher highs and higher lows here. And so I'm just not crazy about going short. I think you're better off looking for a long and than looking for a short there. So you might argue for that one to be green. I think it's a bit of a stretch, but and of course you can see we bounce, and we're still bouncing off that trend line. And this one would have been nice. It went lower and turns, comes up here and goes out the other side, closes, but there's just not enough room between there and there. And you can see we're just getting too tight right in here. I don't like going long or short. You figure we'll probably break out to the long side, but I mean, that's kind of the expectations of what price action would do here, since we're making higher highs and higher lows all the way up. But it gives you this fake out first. It sells off and then it takes off. And so there's just not a lot of opportunity that I like entering in here. And then suddenly we get this little sell off right here. There's a higher low here right off that key entry point, but it's not very bearish. If it had been a tick higher, it'd be at almost a perfect neutral bar. So I don't like it. And then we bounce again. First entry, you move up. There's a second entry short right there that fails, but look, it's right back into that resistance area across there. But look what happens. It pushes through, pulls back and tests it off that, pulls back and tests that what was resistance, and now it acts as support. It bounces off the EMA. You got the trend line right there. Now I like going long there. And it kind of takes off here, pulls back again to this trend line, but not a very good signal bar. I don't have the other side, but you can see there's a nice channel working up to there. Takes off. There's a second entry long right here, but again, look at all that congestion, how you're stacked up. This looks almost like a doji. This looks like one. This would have worked. And again, you probably could argue for that to be at least green, because it is a higher low. It is it's not really, I mean, technically you could treat that like a second entry too. You pull back first entry. It makes a lower high here. It never goes lower until here though. So you could still look at that as basically a second entry. Technically, even though it didn't break lower here, this would be a second entry here as well. Of course, you don't want to take that. And then we're just still kind of going sideways, but notice we got a break here and we got two legs up, and then we make a lower high and it breaks higher and turns and goes down. I like going short there. I really thought maybe we'd sell off here, but didn't happen. We just moved down an equal distance, bounce, and there's a second entry long there. Notice that high, first entry, pull back second entry. I like going long there. You got enough room for a little more than a scalp out of that, but then it turns back down and you make another leg down. And then notice the low there, first entry, second entry, and it bounces off the equal distance move down here. So I like going long on that one, and really I thought we'd go back up to the highs, but it doesn't. It still gives you enough to get out, but it just kind of tightens up and goes sideways, and I don't see any more trades in there till we get into the 2 o'clock hour. So this is another one that's not really easy to trade, because most of your entries are going to be either off this point or this point up here. And you get a few off here, but notice how they just get stuck there. They don't really go anywhere. It just kind of goes sideways. So this is almost, well, notice how you spiked up and kind of go sideways, and then you spike up and kind of go sideways. This one is definitely flatter than this. This still has a kind of an upward bias to it. So it's somewhat of a similar pattern, just a little smaller. And here it's still the same. We spiked up and went sideways, had a little, and then sell off and take off. Spiked up, went sideways, sell off, and then goes higher. Spikes up, goes sideways, sells off, goes higher. So there's three, and each time the pattern gets a little smaller. So there's three kind of repeat patterns there, which might have led you right here if this hadn't have been after 2 o'clock, so taking one of these entries right here because it looks like the same pattern we've already seen. And notice how it took off here. It does the same thing here. I would be looking actually for a measured move. I'd measure from here to here. Bring this over. And that would have been my target when it went higher here. You can see we went a little bit higher than that before it sold off. So if you saw the patterns, you might have, you know, just right here at 2 o'clock, you might have entered one of these, especially on that second entry right there. I'll go ahead and mark it since it was such a slow day and you really had a hard time. It might have been worth taking a trade, but I wouldn't take one much after 215, 220 because you just don't have. A lot of times it'll end up just going sideways like that. You don't want to get stuck in a trade and have to exit it at 3, you know, whatever time. Different brokers, but generally you got to be out around 3 o'clock, a little bit before, or whatever. Depends on your broker. And you don't want to get stuck with a trade where you get kicked out, hoping it's going to give you another tick or two. And you know, I've made that mistake back in the old days. I don't do that anymore. Make sure you don't do that. But you can see it's really all up today. When you back out, it was a pretty nice rally. We went from, well, really the lows down here are 26.85, round in there, 80, 85, somewhere in that range, all the way to 27.40. So it was a nice rally today. But anyway, that's going to do it for today. So I'm going to wrap it up and get out of here. I'm a little late getting this done this evening. I would have liked to have it up here a little earlier, but I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow and wrap up our week. But this is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.